I'm King Link, and welcome to the Humble Choice January 2021 review. Man, that sounds a little odd. So I hope you like leftovers because I think that's what I have for you this month. Like always, I played each game for 1 hour, and I'm here to tell you which games are worth checking out and which games you might want to skip. Premium and Classic subscribers get all the games this month like always, so let's get started with this list. PC Building Simulator. This is another simulator game, and I'm going to hold off on discussing the headliner aspects of this game until I look at the whole bundle, but this is a game where you work on PCs and try to fix them up, and I kind of love the idea here. My first job ever was working in a PC repair and building shop, so this is a special place in my heart, though that was a little over 20 years ago, so the tech has changed. Before the bundle came out, I actually had to do some work on a pair of computers to swap hard drives in them, and while I played the game, I not only had to do the same thing, but used a similar process, which is extremely cool. There's an authenticity here that feels right. At the same time, this is a simulator game, so it's a scaled down version of the real thing. No scraping your hands on an overly small case or having trouble running the cables. Thank God for both of those. It's a repetitive game though, but it's also an interesting one, and compared to Rover Mechanic Simulator last year, I would choose this game every single time. It's interesting and very slick, and I didn't run out of stuff to do in the first hour. So pick this up if you like working on the internals of PCs or just like the simulator genre. Even if you're curious, I would give this one a nod for being realistic enough to be worthy of the simulator title. I'm probably going to return to see what else this game has in store for me. Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey. This is a survival game of a different type. Rather than just try to survive an experience, here you try to evolve your apes and grow your species to develop better skills and abilities. Conceptually, Ancestors is a fantastic game. It feels like the team took one section of that old Sid Meier game, Spore, and really developed the concept, focusing on growing neurons and developing offsprings with new abilities and skills over time, even having genetic mutations. The ideas at work here are fantastic and are exciting. But Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey isn't able to capitalize on the concepts as it tries too hard to create a new UI and interface that ends up being more frustrating than exciting. There's an attempt to go for a minimalist interface that works, but the control schemes doesn't feel intuitive, and players will likely have to spend entirely too much time fighting against it. The tutorial is also too simplistic, and it almost feels like it was begrudgingly put into the game against the wishes of the team. It's more intrusive than helpful and lacks important information and clear delivery. Pick this game up if you want a game that will challenge you with its discoveries and experience. There are brilliant moments such as the feeling of leaping between branches, but this is a rough game, and it's one where the player will spend time struggling against the game to really enjoy it. Pathologic 2. This claims it's an open-world horror RPG, and sure, I could see where it's coming from, but I find it to be more like an open-world survival game. Of course, I'm only an hour in, and it's probably not that indicative of the full game, which is closer to a 40-hour experience. The first half hour is a set of cutscenes that feel out of place and probably could have been done better. Random stuff happens, people refer to stuff the character clearly should know about, but the player doesn't, and the narration doesn't match the subtitles. With this being a 2, I thought maybe you have to play the first game first, but it's actually a remake. Honestly, this just feels broken at times and just not very polished at other times. Then the player gets to the main game and is presented with rather severe survival mechanics in a town that seems to despise him or is out to get him. There's not really horror yet outside of one scene so far, and this is supposed to be a rather long game, so maybe the game will change over time, but all I found was a rather dreary open world survival game, one that I was not interested in continuing to play. It reminded me of Disco Elysium, which I absolutely loved exploring, but here I found the nature of the world uninteresting. Now, I'll admit, there are some fervent fans of this game. People seem to love this game beyond anything else, and I'm not a guy who likes the horror genre, so if you like horror or survival games, give this one a shot. But personally, I don't think I even get the passionate love of this game from a conceptual standpoint. Maybe I'm missing something. And feel free to let me know down in the comments what I'm missing. Warhammer Chaosbane. This is a hack and slash dungeon crawler like Diablo, though I found it a little bit underwhelming for the hour I spent here. I played as a dwarven engineer, so she had a lot of flame-powered gadgets that I could use, and the gameplay felt really good. The gameplay mostly has players diving into a dungeon for different goals, which is given from a single quest giver so far. Yet Warhammer Chaosbane story is shockingly weak. Warhammer is a massive franchise, but this feels like it has almost no lore to the missions. The enemies all feel the same, and the levels feel like they have little that make them special, though that could be due to the randomized elements of the map design. Still, that's something that Diablo never really had to struggle with. Parts of the game that haven't unlocked make me think that there might be more, but I haven't seen it yet. Though there is a lot of DLC as well, including an additional character, additional chapters, and an entire skill tree that's DLC only apparently. Then there's also gold and XP boosts. I had to make sure that this wasn't being made by Ubisoft. Overall, this feels like an average dungeon crawler. I probably would only recommend this if you're a fan of both Diablo and Warhammer. I think there are far better versions of this game, and it's not a bad game itself, but not an exciting one either. Total Tank Simulator. This is a strategy game with an FPS component as well. You set up large groups of tanks, give them simplistic orders at the beginning of a battle, and then set them loose. You can then control any of your units and blow up other tanks. It feels like this game is trying to be like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, I think, but based on World War II instead. Each battle I played ended up with my team either getting smashed very early or an ending that lasted 5 to 10 minutes of 3 to 4 units chasing down one last infantry. This game might have done better if it stuck to the strategy portion, but I couldn't find a way to issue orders after the battle started, which is a shame. Controlling units usually felt underwhelming, especially because you controlled one out of a group and would eventually move away from that group. Except for the infantry, which could throw sticky bombs that just murdered tanks, though the AI didn't seem to do that on its own. So pick this up if you love the look here and love setting up tanks and throwing them at groups of enemy tanks. But if you want either a solid strategy game or a great FPS or a tank commander even, this is not for you. It sits in the middle in a place that probably should have been avoided. Song of Horror. This is a survival horror game that offers permadeath, multiple playable characters, and a solid puzzle experience. The first hour revolves around a mansion with the first character players control getting trapped while following a music box sound. Players are then able to choose their character from a large cast. Entering the mansion with a new character starts the real game, and players will have to solve several puzzles that remind me of puzzles from Resident Evil, though I will say that cautiously because there's no combat yet and just a single QTE so far that will be on screen. The puzzles here are interesting. The idea of a permadeath system seems interesting, though I haven't actually run into that challenge just yet. While I'm not usually a big horror fan, I can say I'm actually enjoying the tense situations here, as it's more suspense than scary monster trying to eat your face. With this game taking about 15 hours and spanning multiple locations, this sounds like I'm barely scratching the surface yet, but it's a solid game so far. I recommend this one to survival horror fans or people who would prefer less combat in the original Resident Evil games. Though this is a tense game, so there's a high level of stress at times in this game, but it feels really good. Not Tonight. This is a post-Brexit version of Papers, Please, though with a few twists. Rather than being a border agent, you're now a bouncer working to earn money so you can stay in England. Instead of being assigned a job, Not Tonight involves selecting jobs that get progressively more challenging and checking IDs or guest lists to let people into clubs. This is a 10-hour game, so it's a lot longer than Papers, Please, but I'm already starting to feel a similar sense of a growing wave of challenge with more things to do and a desire to avoid mistakes. A few side stories are going on with different characters, so I think the narrative will expand. There's also a home area that the player returns to, so this is trying to be a little more advanced than Papers, Please, and I actually applaud that. Though so far this is just checking IDs for some rule set and getting a certain number right, though with the option for bonuses if you hit higher numbers. I recommend fans of Papers, Please to check Not Tonight out. If you want a strange game and you like what you're seeing on screen, it's great for that. Though with the focus on England rather than a fake country, there's a little more political commentary here, though not too much yet. Personally, I'll be returning as I find this style of game fascinating, and this game was already on my wish list. Vampire the Masquerade: Shadows of New York. This may look familiar to longtime fans of Humble Choice. This is a sequel to Vampire the Masquerade: Coteries of New York, or rather a standalone expansion. According to How Long to Beat, it's about half the length at 3 hours instead of 6 hours. This is a simple visual novel where the main character becomes a vampire, though this time around it skips her joining the masquerade and instead focuses on her navigating the vast underground. The main character starts as a reporter and then is turned, and the game jumps forward to her being treated as a traitorous outsider of the vampire group, so the player starts from there. This is the second Vampire the Masquerade game I've played, and it's a strange one. I think there's a lot of potential in the game world known as the World of Darkness, but this has the same issue I had with Vampire the Masquerade Coteries of New York. It feels like it's going to appeal mostly to people who are fans of the World of Darkness. Grab this game if you enjoyed the Vampire the Masquerade games or Coteries of New York from Humble Choice September 2020, or just love visual novels. Otherwise, I think this is a safe skip. Tales of the Neon Sea. This is a point-and-click adventure game where the player walks around as an old cybernetic detective and solves crimes that he stumbles upon. The game starts off a little bit weird, and it's odd that a former police officer would be allowed to investigate random murders, but there's also something special here. There's a cyberpunk aesthetic that works, along with the feeling of a political landscape that sets up a human versus robot conflict that's starting to bubble up. In the first hour, the game is pretty solid, with players having to find items and use them on the appropriate thing. There were at least 3 clever puzzles so far, and the game explores this concept of a character that has cybernetic implants that are starting to fail. I'm interested in finding out what's going to happen with him next. There was also a really solid murder investigation that got me interested as well. Pick this up if you like detective stories or point-and-click games. If you're interested in the cyberpunk theming, I think you'll find something great here. The opening seems to do the genre justice. Anyone who wants action, though, probably will not enjoy this one. Minoria. This feels like it's a game that's trying to be a Metroidvania with the difficulty of Dark Souls, but probably doesn't have the team size or funding to really hit either of those lofty goals. Yet the game that exists is rather interesting and fun. Minoria involves 2 nuns roaming a map trying to find princesses of their kingdom and fighting against the witches of the other side. This is a pretty expansive map, and the combat is mostly focused on really solid combat systems. I will mention that the parry in this game feels really overpowered and fun to pull off, though without it the combat may feel weak or janky, so make sure you try that out. Yet, I do want to call out a few issues. The game feels balanced, but also a bit strange, like the numbers for the HP and damage feel chosen at random, but still feel balanced. So far, there are no traversal abilities, so you're doing the Metroidvania style exploration, though it's only by picking up keys. These aren't huge issues, just oddities that make the game feel a little strange, but this is a small team from Brazil, and perhaps that's the reason. With this game and Dandara, perhaps we should all be paying a little more attention to Brazil's game dev community. Pick this up if you like Dark Souls or Metroidvania games, but are okay with it being, a little easier. If you want something with a lot of polish on it, this one might bother you as it's a little rough around the edges. Deleveled. This game is a minimalist platformer where players have to use momentum and bounce their squares towards goals and switches to beat levels, and that's about it. Okay, obviously the level design will make this a little more complicated, and there's a lot of puzzle aspects such as getting your character to reach certain points to activate switches, but in general this is a rather simplistic game where the question is how best to move your objects into the right spaces. While each area introduces new concepts in general, this game is just different variations on the same themes of bouncing, momentum, and switch puzzles. The music is okay, not great, and I put this game down after about 40 minutes as I think I've seen enough. Good concept, but I feel like I've played similar concepts so many times before I wasn't having a great time with this one. Check this out if you like minimalist game design or want to play with momentum puzzles, otherwise you can just skip this one. The Ambassador Fractured Timelines. This is a twin-stick shooter where players play a mage and fight against areas of enemies. The art style in this game is unique, though I'm not really sold on it. You can see on screen how it looks. There's also some interesting enemy designs, but a majority of this game is fighting against the same enemies and remembering their attack patterns, like the axe soldier who swings in a giant circle, the sword guy who needs 2 hits to be defeated, and so on. I beat about a third of this game in just over an hour. The game tracks a number of different feats, so if you want to go for all the achievements, you're going to have to replay levels multiple times in different ways, but I felt no desire to even try that. In general, it just feels like a very generic twin-stick shooter. Pick this up if you love the art, because that's what this game is going to look like. Also, if you like twin-stick shooters, you might have fun with this one for a few hours. However, outside that, I think you can safely skip this one as well. That's the 12 choices for this month's Humble Choice, but of course we get a bonus game. This month it's Heeey Park Boy, which feels like an incremental game with a mix of the flavor of Katamari Damacy or Watam. Just an uber cheery and happy adventure focusing on watering flowers and playing music for them. The entire game just lifted my spirits. There's something serene about running around and just turning this dreary park into a green, colorful paradise. It's just a charming game that will make players smile. Now, the only complaint I have is that it takes a decent amount of time for that first upgrade to come, but after that point you start earning upgrades decently fast. Now, I'm a little sad that I had to stop playing this game because I want to go back and play more and see how much there is to this game, and also that it's not on Steam because it's now in my downloaded games folder that I always forget about. I recommend this game to anyone who wants an upbeat game, especially for fans of Kita Takahashi, the guy behind Katamari Damacy. If you want action or combat, you won't have it here, but you get this cute guy boogieing down as he grows flowers, and I think that's what I prefer. Ending on a fun game is so nice. It makes me a little sad because now we have to discuss the bundle itself. Alright, I think it's clear I'm not a fan of this bundle. I didn't make that quip at the beginning about these games being left over to just be funny. This bundle feels like Humble had a few games left over from other deals and threw it together. The headliners feel a little weak and odd. I already know Pathologic 2 is going to get some people excited for the bundle, and that's great, but currently it's only $15 during the Steam sale, and probably could have done better if it was put in the October bundle. PC Building Simulator feels really strange as a headliner, as that's actually been bundled before by Humble and goes for about $20. The rest of the bundle seems to be very hit or miss, and I honestly struggled on really recommending the full bundle because I only found a few games that I enjoyed enough to recommend to other people. Oh, and then there's Deleveled and the Ambassador Fractured Timelines, which sounds like separate games, but they're both published by Quantum Astrophysicist Guild, and they both feel a little weak for the bundle. This just feels like a strange month, and I hope it's a weird one and the rest of 2021 can deliver a better set of games. So with that said, it's time to go over the strongest and the weakest of the month. Starting with the third weakest, we have Vampire the Masquerade, Shadows of New York, for all the same reasons the other Vampire the Masquerade visual novel was on the weakest list in September. You really need to like Vampire the Masquerade to get into this visual novel for the series, and this one actually skips much of the world building and jumps into the story, and it's half the length of the first visual novel. The second weakest this month is Total Tank Simulator. I'm curious about the genre this game is in, but not this game. The game feels unnecessarily hard and not in a way that feels fair to you. I wouldn't mind a strategic game or a game where I watch large armies crash into each other, but Total Tank Simulator seems to want the player to take control of the units with a system that doesn't really feel rewarding. The weakest of the month is the Quantum Astrophysicist Guild games. I'll show Deleveled here, but both of these games feel very strange to be in the bundle. They have under 25 reviews on Steam before the bundle was out and limited coverage. Now I understand Humble could have found a hidden gem here, but these are very weak to be put in the bundle. Alright, with the weakest games out of the way, we can talk about the strongest games, and even with a rough month, I found games I think I can recommend to people. The fifth strongest of the month is Song of Horror. This one surprised me, both in the style of the game and experience. While I usually stay away from horror, there was more dread and danger around every corner here, rather than scary stuff chasing the player. I'm actually pretty intrigued, which is not what I was expecting from the name. The fourth strongest of the month is PC Building Simulator. While I'm not sure it deserves to be a headliner, this is a really solid and well put together game. Simulator games tend to be about repetition, and I'm sure that's here, but after the hour here, it felt like I only had scratched the surface. I want to play more to see what else I can do in the game. Having real parts was also a great decision that really made this game stand out. The third strongest of the month is Minoria. This has interesting gameplay, good characters, and a map that was fun to explore. The combat is a little bit brutal at times and takes time to get used to, but it started to click for me after 40 minutes and I really want more. The second strongest of the month is Tales of the Neon Sea. I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventure games and a good detective game. Toss in a great cyberpunk aesthetic and I'm sold. This also is supposed to be at least 10 hours long, and I've already seen a few solid puzzles, so this seems like an easy game to recommend. The strongest of the month is Not Tonight. Papers, Please was a fantastic game, but Not Tonight feels like it takes the concept and evolves it to add more content to the game. It adds more story to the formula, develops characters for more than a few chance meetings, and gives the player a little more agency. If it can keep that momentum it already has, this will be a great game. It's also interesting that apparently Brexit was finalized on New Year's Day, and this game was in the bundle that released that day, so that's a good thing as well. But I've also heard Brexit happen multiple times already, so I'm not 100% on that. And that's what I have for the Humble Choice this month. So what do you all think about this month's bundle? Are you pausing, buying the bundle? And seriously, if you can give me a counterpoint to my review of Pathologic 2, please feel free to let everyone know down in the comments. I would really appreciate that. If you've enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, consider subscribing. And if you really want to help out, ring that bell for notifications and check out my future videos. That would be great. The bundle is actually the anniversary of the Humble Choice. A year ago, they switched to the new format of the Humble Choice, and I think it's time to take a look back and see where we are. But this video has gone on long enough, so I'm planning on doing a follow-up video on my channel about Humble Bundle and Humble Choice at some point this month. Keep an eye out for that one. I'm going to be popping up 2 videos here. I did a video with my daughter on various co-op games we enjoyed together. You might want to check that one out. And you can also check out the video I did on the best games I played in 2020. There's at least one Humble Choice game in there, so find out which one. Until then, I'm King Link, and thanks for watching.